Hey everyone, welcome to this podcast called Ken Reads, where I, Ken, read out your letter that you've shared with me in the hopes that I can better help you understand what the F just happened between you and the last partner you were dating, whether it was in a relationship or a situationship. I look at these experiences from the lens of attachment theory. I don't just come up with thought terminating cliches like, they're just not that into you, or if they wanted to, they would. While some of those phrases might have their benefit in other dynamics, I try and look at this from the lens of, is there perhaps an insecure attachment issue that's at play in these particular dynamics? And though I am an Australian counsellor, I am not someone who is going to be responding to these letters as if I was with a client. I'm here to provide validation, yes, but I can't provide any diagnoses on these. So even if, a lot of people might understandably hear this and be like, well, that sounds like a narcissist. At best, I'll probably say, sounds a bit narky. I probably won't go any further than that out of respect to my ethical boundaries in regards to what I can and can't do. If you find this of benefit to you, fantastic. That's what I want. And if you want to submit your letter, you're very welcome to, once there is obviously availability per month. And I'll happily read out and share my own 2 cents as to what I think has gone on in your dating experience to offer you a sense of validation for what you've been through, and also to give other people listening a chance to feel like maybe this relates to what they've also experienced as part of collective healing. So with that all out of the way, let's dive in to the latest letter. So we're back with my good teammate, Amy, who is going to help me unpack a letter from Jane. Now, before we get into Jane's letter, Amy, would you like to reintroduce yourself for everyone?
Yes, hello everyone. It's so nice to chat with you again. I'm a attachment coach here on Ken's team, and I specialize in breakup recovery and anxious attachment healing, fearful avoidant attachment healing. And I really love meeting with all of you and talking about this because this is an area where there's so much healing possible. So I hope you enjoy listening to these and find them helpful.
I think healing is definitely something that a lot of people, get out of these experiences, because not only is the writing of these experiences quite cathartic, but I think also the validation too. So this time we're going to be talking about Jane's experience. So let's dive straight in. Jane writes, "Hi, Ken. Before I start with my story, I want to say thank you for your work. Your account is helping me get through one of the most challenging times of my life. Thank you, Jane. I appreciate that." Jane writes, "One year ago, when I was 38 years old, now met my ex-partner who's 37 years old online. He was visiting friends in my city when we matched. After he left, we stayed in contact. He was very communicative and at the time seemed open, or so I thought. He visited me again and shared that he was going through a divorce. How he described it, it was him who had decided to leave the marriage and had been over for months. What I figured out later was quite the opposite. Oh. He presented himself as caring, secure, and attentive. He called me every day, wrote messages. About a month in, he started talking about falling in love, sending me love letters with poems. When his ex-wife came by, he openly displayed my things at his place. He once said if I were in his city, he'd take me to his pre-divorce appointment. In this letter, I describe his odd behaviors, but we shared beautiful moments of love and closeness. We had a lot in common. I met his friends and his father. He took any chance to come to my city. He gave me keys to his apartment. I was happy and fell in love. He'd tell me, no one has ever loved me like you do, and I've never loved anyone like this. I'm finally discovering myself with you. Okay, before we go any further, I just want to say there's already a lot of stuff going on within such a short time frame. Amy, what are your thoughts on just this initial part of this experience?
Oh yeah, I think there's a lot unfolding, and I'm definitely picking up on some red flags that we will definitely get to later in this letter. Um, I think the thing that's sticking out to me most is that he said pretty early on that nobody has ever loved me like you do, and I've never loved anyone like this. And I'm finally discovering myself with you. Now, normally that might sound like a beautiful thing to say and a beautiful thing to hear someone say to you. And it might not raise any flags. And that might be fair and true in many circumstances. But being that he's fresh off of a divorce, the fact that he's saying nobody has ever loved me like you do, I've never loved anyone like this, and I'm finally discovering myself with you. It's actually that last part that really sticks out with me. And what I'm thinking might be happening at this point is that he might be falling into a little bit of what is called limerence with you, Jane, at this point.
Uh-huh.
And it sounds like he might be experiencing things or getting some needs met that he hasn't been meeting himself and that he didn't get met in the relationship with his wife. And so he's just diving head in. It doesn't mean that the feelings weren't genuine, but it means that the intensity and the pace is not exactly sponsored by what's really going on in reality, but perhaps more what's going on his end. What do you think, Ken?
I love everything that you just said there. To me, this is a bit of a red flag because, uh, this guy is going through divorce and he's already sending you love letters and poems. Now, don't get me wrong, that's lovely to receive. Like, I don't think there's anything wrong in terms of having some romantic experiences with people you date. I'm all for romance. I'm a romantic at heart. But when we look at this with the context, it's a lot within such a short space of time. And in the moment, I know it may not have felt like much because, you're getting to know him over a few weeks, and then by about a month in, he's professing his love for you. Then he's expressing this through poems and love letters. But we got to also remember too, it's like this guy is dealing with what I call unfinished business with his presumably ex-wife, from what I'm reading so far. Like, this guy sounds like he's in distress, and he also is seeking you out as a bit of an escapist fantasy to enjoy this. And again, go back to what Amy said, it does not mean that he doesn't like you. It's just more of a case of what would motivate someone in this context to be so intense with you at such an early point in time. And I think the devil is in the detail. It sounds to me like he has big unfinished business with his ex-wife. I mean, I'm assuming at this stage that it's ex-wife, but I'm getting the impression that, the details of that might evolve and change as I continue reading this letter. But yeah, to me, like, where even if it's not, overly dramatic, it's still in the territory of limerence and love bombing to me. What are your thoughts on that?
Big time. Yes, absolutely love bombing. With the poems and the love letters this early on, we have to be so careful. If we're leaning a little more anxious, these are things that we so deeply want and are
Mhm.
usually so deeply missing. And so when we get them, it feels so, so good that we sort of miss these red flags and we don't really pick up on the fact that, hey, wait a minute, this is a little too much too soon.
Yeah, 100 billion%. So let's continue with what Jane's written here. He shared his insecurities. He envied that I lived independently and made my own choices. His life, by contrast, felt trapped, with a mother who made him feel responsible for her suffering and a distant father. Ooh, we will come back to that. He would say, "Only when all the old people die will I be free." Actually, we're gonna deal with that now. Wow. I want to start this out by saying, what utter hopelessness. That is, oh God, that's a very pejorative attitude.
Oh my gosh, yeah. And here's the thing, Jane, in no point of this will we be saying, "Oh, you should have seen this or you did anything wrong whatsoever." We understand that there was a lot of love here, and this is a really painful situation for you. And I'm sure that you've learned so much while, going through this situation. But, you know, this right here would kind of be grounds for a secure person to really deeply consider leaving this relationship or not going any further with this person. And the thing is, when we're adults and we're carrying a lot of wounding from childhood that we haven't addressed, it will, without fail, 100% be played out in our adult romantic relationships. And you can see the beginning of this now. Um, to say that he still feels very trapped. Feeling trapped is a huge fearful, avoidant, and dismissive avoidant core wound. And unless they deal with it, it will wreak havoc on all of the relationships with other people and the relationship with themselves. So I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about this, Ken, because these sentences are so telling.
They're not only telling, they're alarming. Like for me, the fact that he said he feels that he envies, you know, your independence and being able to make your own choices, where in contrast, he feels trapped with a mum who makes him feel responsible for her suffering with a distant father. I mean, to me, we're already getting themes of enmeshment, emotional incest, and a distant father. Okay, so he's probably not really had a very good protector from that enmeshment that he's had from his mum. And the fact that and the thing that really bothers me about all of this, in combination with what he said, is when all the old people die, will I be free? It's making it sound like his freedom is contingent on what's going on with the people who are in his family life. Like it seems like, he's beholden to these elderly people when it's like, look, unless they have chained you to the ground and they've also found ways to manipulate you financially and you're stuck in a prison or a detention that they've designed for you, then no, they actually don't have that much control over you. It can feel like it. I'm not going to take that away from him. But I think what really rubs me the wrong way with this is feeling like he has no agency. And key thing, doesn't sound like he has boundaries. And I'm sorry for him because it sounds like, he's got a pretty, like, no one would just say, oh, when all the old people die, will I be free, for nothing. Like, for him to have said that, it must make him feel like he's holding on to a lot of baggage from other people. But I don't want to empathize with him too much because what I really want to get at is to say is that this is a very unhealthy attitude to have, especially when you're in your mid to late 30s. It's like, bro, you need to have boundaries. You cannot be feeling like you're that responsible for other people's stuff.
Oh my gosh, yes to everything you just said, Ken. It is such a red flag, especially being in your mid to late 30s. And like you said, he's really, and like you said, yes, of course, we feel sorry for the fact that things must have had to happen to him in his life for him to feel this large degree of learned helplessness. But when you are a fully grown adult and you do not have a hold of your own agency and you feel this degree of learned helplessness, and you can really hear the resentment here too. The thing is, Jane, and I'm sure that you experienced this and we know that you did, this resentment will be turned square in your direction.
Yep.
All these things that he's holding anger about for his childhood, to his caregivers, for the old people that he's waiting to die so that he could be free, that will be turned toward you. And, also the fact that he envied that you lived independently, that I think also might have played into the limerence. Because when we fall into limerence with people, it's usually because we see this trait in them or this way about their life that we feel so disempowered to embody in our life that we kind of just fall in love with that trait. But again, that's not coming from a healthy place. And so, this is really, really setting the stage for not great things to be happening.
I completely agree with you. So let's continue with what Jane says. She writes, he was feeling like he wasn't living his own life. He married his ex-wife in his 30s, thinking it would finally make him normal. Ooh. As he thought his family expected him to, and that would give him a sense of stability. Ouch. Early on, we had a conversation about having kids. He knew that I couldn't have biological children. I'd had surgery years ago, but wasn't closed off to the idea of having a family. He responded, well, I'm not 100% sure if I want my own kids, and even if I do, there are different ways to have a child. We didn't discuss it further. I held on to that statement and thought, when the relationship settles, we'll talk about it again. Fair enough. Having kids wasn't a priority topic at the moment, and since he hadn't finalized his divorce and we had a long distance relationship, he never brought up this topic up till the breakup. Often he showed emotional instability, like being anxious, angry, or melancholic. He made mean comments, especially about women. He'd sometimes joke, do I have problems with women? Oh, yes, I do. He made harsh remarks out of the blue during beautiful moments. He apologized, saying, I know I can destroy beautiful moments. I never criticized him for that, and although we did talk about it. When it came to vulnerable conversations, his responses were often dismissive or shallow. He did not feel comfortable with being truly vulnerable. He often mentioned his ex-wife negatively, comparing her to me. According to him, she was demanding, critical, and set a boundary that he needed therapy to stay with her. Good on her. While he admitted he went to therapy briefly, he also said, she felt lonely during the marriage, and I don't think I ever really loved her, although I liked her. She was like my mother. Ouch. He displayed jealousy. He accused his best friend of looking at me inappropriately, saying, I know him. He was so nervous in your presence. I know you're exactly his type. You'd be better off with him. Similar conversations repeated throughout the relationship because he was jealous of my past dates and felt insecure. Once he said, I'm not quite your type. The guy from the cafe is. If you did not already fuck him in the past. Okay. Why don't we take a pause here and just talk about some of the raging insecurities this guy has? I'm gonna start with the misogyny. I'm not surprised because typically people who have experienced enmeshment from a caregiver do build up resentment to the gender of that caregiver, meaning that if you had an overbearing mum, you might actually be a bit of a misogynist because you carry a lot of that hatred from your mum, being so overbearing, and you project that onto other women. What are your thoughts on all this, Amy?
Oh, absolutely. You can definitely hear a theme of this even from the previous paragraph we were just discussing. And again, we empathize with people who have been through the trauma that caused these behaviors and wounds. And at the same time, we cannot empathize with them to the point where we are putting up with it. We can't.
Yep.
It's everybody's responsibility to heal. And unfortunately, he seems a little too comfortable with his internal mess, to be quite honest. He seems a little too comfortable with shoving this stuff onto you, Jane, and saying inappropriate things to you about, this other guys who he thinks that you should go sleep with. Um, I mean, I have to say, just in what we read, there are about 50 red flags. And I don't say that to say, you should have seen these. This is such a beautiful opportunity for you to be able to go inward and look at where you might have places to nourish, that might explain why these flags didn't jump out at you. And this is how we all heal. But this behavior is just extremely concerning, especially the fact that, let's just go back, the fact that his ex-wife put a condition that she would only stay in the marriage unless he went to therapy. It just is pretty clear that he was probably expressing all of these behaviors and this woundedness in that relationship, and that
Yep.
was probably the breakdown, and it probably might not have had anything to do with her. What do you think, Ken?
I completely agree. To add to what you said, the fact that he called his ex-wife like his mother suggests to me that he's projecting. It seems to me he didn't like her boundaries. He did not like the fact that she was being assertive and standing up for herself. And the fact that she felt lonely during the marriage suggests to me she knew that something wasn't right during that marriage and she called it out. And the fact that, he felt as though she was like his mother suggests to me that, her assertiveness triggered the heck out of him. And I think that, she's probably nothing like, his mother, but it's just suggests to me that he doesn't like being told what to do. And that's a very common theme for a lot of avoidant attachers who've experienced enmeshment, which is they don't like being told what to do. They want to control the intimacy because they had their, sense of closeness completely eroded often when they were a kid. But to your point, Amy, being too comfortable with his own mess, I love that phrase so much because I think you're so right. And I feel that comes out so noticeably when he, on one hand, makes a very misogynistic comment about having problems with women, but then quickly remarking, oh, I know I can destroy beautiful moments. What really alarms me about that is A, he knows he has a problem, and B, it doesn't seem like he's willing to do anything to change that. And so we have now entered, I'm going to be honest, he's an abuser because he knows that he has the capacity to do bad things and he's not, and it just seems to me like there's a real reluctance to actually do anything about it.
Oh my gosh, 1,000,000%. And it's not, we don't love to use the word abuser, But the thing is, a lot of people do emotionally abuse people in relationships, both on purpose and by accident. And do you know what? In this situation, I think it is a combination of both, in
Yeah.
that, just what you said, Ken, he is aware to some degree that he has wounding inside, toxicity inside, that is leaking out into the relationship. He said, I know I can destroy beautiful moments. He's aware of his mood shifts and the way he's speaking to you and the way he's showing up in this relationship. And here's the thing, when you are aware of your wounding and the way it's affecting the people around you, and you choose not to do anything about it, that is manipulation, and that is emotional abuse, unfortunately. And it's dangerous. It's dangerous because there are people, it in the case of just mild dismissive avoidance, oftentimes they truly do not understand, the differences of how they see love and relationships and how others do. And so when they're behaving in their dismissive avoidant ways, they don't really understand that they're hurting people, and they don't really understand where their wounds are coming from. This person sounds like he is perhaps fearful avoidant with a heavy dismissive avoidant leaning edge, which I think Ken and I agree that is kind of the most difficult attachment style to be in a relationship with.
Yep.
But truly, his knowledge, his acknowledgement of his own issues is actually a red flag in this scenario, because he continues with the extremely unhealthy behavior. And when you voice that you know about something that is wrong, that is causing harm to someone, and you also don't do anything to change it, that just highlights another whole problem, which is, it's dangerous.
Yes, I completely agree. And it also shows that it's more, he's almost justifying his behavior now. It's almost just like, oh, I know I do this behavior. It doesn't seem like it's a case of, I can recognize how this behavior is doing harm. If anything, it's almost like, you know, yeah, I know I have this bad habit, but it is what it is. And that kind of attitude is really not functional for a relationship. One thing I'm also going to touch on very briefly is that very jealous part of him that came out with the guy from the cafe. I mean, that is like raging, anxious leaning stuff from a fearful avoidant. Fearful avoidance, I feel like dismissives can be jealous, but they don't show it very often. If anything, they're they'll often be a bit shocked if you move on quickly without them, and then they'll be a bit, surprised as to how that happened. But fearful avoidance, I think, have more of a proclivity to be angry and upset if you show, like, if it looks like you're potentially showing interest or another person showing you interest when they're really in a very fear of abandonment state of mind. And that's often, I find that often happens before the avoidance side kicks in. So this is consistent with the fact that at this stage, Jane, it seems like that avoidant part of him hasn't activated just yet. You're still probably in that very early anxious part of him that's, uncertain about whether or not you're going to betray or leave him. He's obviously had these melancholic and dramatic moments, but something tells me the avoidance side is yet to activate. What are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely, Ken. And you're so right. With regard to the jealousy piece, and he's really expressing the anxious side of a fearful avoidant. And you're so right. I don't think that dismissive avoidants handle jealousy like this at all. If you're, I mean, a dismissive avoidant, if you're dating a dismissive avoidant and they're jealous, you probably won't ever hear about it. And if you do, it will be in a very low key, passive aggressive way, not aggressive like this at all. And part of the reason for that is that expressing jealousy is vulnerable. Whether you're doing it angrily like he's doing it, or whether you're doing it in a sincere, non-confrontational way. So it's, yeah, you're really sensing the volatility here. Fearful avoidants tend to be much more volatile when it comes to any kind of conflict within the relationship. It's a lot spicier, and not in a good way. Um, so yeah, I think it's just what you said, and I'm sure we're going to see the more dismissive side coming out soon.
I just chuckled when you said spicy because I think that's just like, that's really it in a nutshell. It's just like, oh, spicy trauma activate whenever you're engaging with someone like this. All right, Jane continues. By December 2023, I noticed a shift in him. He was stressed at work and feeling unappreciated. Ah, here we go. This is where the avoidance stuff is probably kicking in. He had difficulties to make any decision about his career. Affection became shallow and intimacy was mostly reduced to porn, like directed sex. He often said, I don't want emotional talks. I just want to fuck. Most conversations were about him. We talked constantly about his struggles, work stress, poor sleep, and feeling nervous. He lashed out in frustration and justified it by saying, You're my first reference person, so deal with that. Jesus. When I asked him lovingly not to treat me like an emotional punching bag, he claimed it was a joke. He overreacted during conflicts, blamed past experiences, saying, It's what I heard always from my mum and my ex. I felt like he was fighting them in this conversation, not talking to me. Yes, that's exactly what was going on, Jane. You're bang on accurate. When I gently shared my emotions, he either did not want to talk or would say, Your feelings are you. Oh, God. Your feelings are your responsibility, not mine, as if my feelings were a criticism of him. But he still claimed he is the most emotionally intelligent person I ever met in my life, and I gained my awareness about emotions from him during our relationship. At the start of the year, I faced several stressful situations, and he seemed to feel pressured to be supportive, even when I asked for very little. He often lashed out, even if I didn't ask for help, and would often leave to surf or walk. When he did help, he later complained his needs were unmet and found my vulnerability difficult to handle. Jesus. Once I went to the emergency room alone during his birthday because he didn't want to cancel his plans. It turned out I needed surgery ASAP. Months later, he told me I always put myself in the center of attention, like during his birthday. Wow. In April 2024, out of the blue, I received a voicemail from him saying, I've been thinking a lot about the topics of kids and I want to have my own biological children. He added, I don't want to lose you. I want you in my life. I've even considered polyamorous relationships just to keep you in my life. Shit. I'm so suffering that I have to make this decision. Every attempt I made to discuss this or offer solutions to still build a family were rejected. He refused to go to couples therapy. He yelled, Why should I live if I won't have children? Or the whole process of adopting will, oh, sorry, he continues, or the whole process of adopting will end in catastrophe. I know myself. If I don't get my needs fulfilled, I'll treat you badly and you'll leave me. I learned that he had been discussing this topic with his friends, but not with me. He even quoted them to justify the breakup. I'm going to read one more paragraph and then we'll get into this. In one particularly harsh conversation, I shared with him why I had surgery and how my traumatic childhood impacted my feelings in the past about starting a family. After therapy, I had healed and was open to the idea of children, even through adoption. His response was to accuse me of trying to manipulate him out of fear of losing him. Fucking hell. He told me to stop acting like a victim and dismiss my feelings about wanting kids as too theoretical and avant-garde. He said he couldn't have a family with someone emotionally overwhelmed like me. A couple of days later, he said that I would be an amazing mother. He said it would be a different solution if you were able to have children not wanting them. Then we would both have to make some compromises. Now I'm the only one making compromises and you would win. Either kids with me or the relationship with me. And you can ask me to stay with you without biological children, but then you'd have to deal with my nasty behavior. Okay, I'm going to take a breath. Amy, do you want to unpack this madness?
My goodness. That's just what it is. And it's funny that you say that because it feels it feels so backwards and unhinged that, and I say that respectfully. I'm not trying to mock anyone here, but I say that because of this. The things that he is throwing at you, that he is accusing you of, these justifications, these reasons, these accusations, they are so unfounded. If anything, they are just straight projections from him, his stuff straight onto you. And what strikes me so much through all of these paragraphs is his victimhood,
Yes.
is his blaming the world and everybody else and you for his pain and his suffering. And here's the thing. When we have trauma in our lives, yes, we are indeed victims. It is possible that people are victimized. Unfortunately, many people are indeed victimized. But, and I'm not a person to say, get out of victim mentality. In fact, I roll my eyes every time I see a post like that. I really don't like that language. But here's the thing. When you are a person who feels like people have done you wrong and you are holding on to this resentment and this anger and this victimhood, and you have no sense of agency, and you do not understand yet that you are an adult and you are responsible for your own healing and making your own decisions, you will be a wrecking ball to everybody that you come in contact with. It will be everybody else's fault. And that is exactly what is happening here, Jane. And my heart really breaks for you because throughout this letter, I have not read one single thing that, insinuates that you started an argument or you were being provocative. And if you had, that would have been completely fine, also, by the way. It just sounds like you have been being a supportive partner, a loving partner, an accepting partner. And it almost seems perhaps like the more loving and accepting you are, the more angry he gets, which actually makes sense.
Yes, I
Um,
agree.
and his volatility is really increasing. And again, it's scary and it's dangerous. And the fact that he's blaming you for all of his stuff is it almost the word narcissist just swirling around in my head. And of course, we can't diagnose anyone, but there are definitely narcissistic traits and tendencies in his behaviors and words. What do you think, Ken?
I completely agree with everything you've said because we're kind of going into a bit of a devalue cycle. Something you said about how Jane's approaching him quite lovingly, and then that's almost causing him to double down and react badly. Do you know, I'm going to cite this from the book Avoidant Abuse by Ria Khan, great book that describes this. I think he actually resents you as a person because you've got all these great traits about you from the sounds of it, Jane. You're kind, conscientious, considerate, loving. And yes, it doesn't mean you're perfect. You've got stuff to work on, obviously. And like everyone, no one's free of unsavory parts of themselves. But I find what's interesting about avoidant abuse is people who are like this, who are acting in such a dysregulated way, and we'll talk about dysregulation with this guy in a minute, is when they are so in that victimhood, as you were describing, Amy, they can be hell-bent on destroying you because if you're presenting kindness, sincerity, that can trigger the heck out of people like this. Because this guy, I would think, has a core deep wound of, toxic shame where he likely feels like he is a bad person. And that's consistent with the things that he said and we've discussed. And to me, it seems like, anytime that wound of toxic shame is activated, he resorts to these very inflammatory remarks where he's trying to almost like bait you into fighting with him. And I feel like, it's what I find really quite terrible, and this links in with the victimhood stuff, is he's abdicating any responsibility. He makes out that, you in his life is such a big imposition. It's like, what do I do with you? We could maybe be polyamorous, or maybe we could just, try something else. This guy's like full on catastrophizing, right? And I feel like going to emotional dysregulation now, what is incredibly consistent about this inconsistent, behavior and moodiness is just how this guy flip-flops from big extreme emotions. 1 minute, or 1 minute, I should say, a while ago, it was love letters and telling you how much, he appreciates the love you share for him. In contrast, now it's almost like you're a burden on his life. And, I just know that if we have, non-biological children, it's going to be a disaster. It's like, how would he actually know that? Like, to me, that just sounds like he's full on freaking out about where this is all going to go. And that very much comes from the avoidance side. It's that fear of the future, that fear of intimacy, that fear of commitment, of locking into something where, he just assumes the worst is going to happen without almost like distancing himself and not personalizing his own thoughts and feelings. I feel like what's going on now is so consistent with how he was at the start, which is this man is intense with all the positive emotions and also the unpleasant emotions as well too. He is, as I think you said, Amy, a wrecking ball. And I agree with you. I actually do think there are degrees of narcissistic traits and tendencies. I can't make a diagnosis of the personality disorder with my title as a counselor, but I can definitely say there is some, really dangerous stuff going on here. And I think that he doesn't seem to have any, he doesn't seem to be regulated at all. And that's only the tip of the iceberg.
Oh, absolutely. Everything you said, unfortunately. Um, and I just want you to know, Jane, in these situations, when someone is coming to a relationship with such a large degree of wounding, such a large degree of learned helplessness, there's nothing that you could have done to change any of this. As you can see, you could have been the most perfect angel. And again, we understand that nobody ever is, but you could have been. And it might have even gotten worse than this. When we have so much pain and anger inside of us, and somebody else is trying to give us love, it will not stick. They cannot hold it. They cannot hold it because they have no point of reference for it. And in the beginning, related to what you said, Ken, he's resenting her so much for this love. And this happens a lot when we have insecure attachment wounding. Oftentimes we pair up in the beginning because we see these beautiful traits in other people that we don't think we have. And he saw you were independent and you lived alone and you didn't have to rely on anyone. And that was something that he lacked because he felt so trapped. But then, unless we start doing our healing work and really integrating those traits that we admire in the other person, if we don't do that, we will begin to resent them. And you can see and hear in his behavior. If you close your eyes and read his behaviors and you removed a lot of the context, you would think that we were talking about a young child. His
Yes.
tantrum, his emotional outbursts, his the ridiculous things he's saying, like, you're my first line of reference, so deal with it. And, I don't want to have emotions. I just want to have sex and I don't want to talk about it. And I just want to do this, like a demanding young, angry child. And that is what happens when we are in relationships and we don't address our early attachment wounding. Our inner child will be running the show. But when we have a wounded inner child running the show in an adult body, that's when things get bad and dangerous. And I think this is what's happening here.
Yes, I completely agree. And I think one quick thing I want to go back to, because I will always call this out whenever I hear it, he basically says something along the lines of, it's your responsibility to deal with your own emotions. No, buddy, your behavior is contributing to the impact that Jane is feeling with her emotions, and you actually do own a part of the puzzle. Because, this guy's gone from being full love bombing, he's now devaluing her. He is full on devaluing her right now. And he's also making some horrible, horrible, comments about, you, Jane, in terms of your biological capability to have children. And you're having to explain to him why, you've gone through this and the decisions you've made. And then he's accusing you. He has the audacity to accuse you to stop acting like a victim and dismissing your feelings. Like, I mean, I'm sorry. What a douchebag. Like, that is, I'd actually say something far harsher, but I just think that, that's disgusting sort of behavior, and it's not okay.
And Jane, I just want to say, because I imagine that this particular piece about him leaving you the voicemail saying that he wants to have his own biological children, and but he knows that's not possible and he doesn't want to lose you. I just want you to understand that an emotionally safe and an emotionally healthy adult would never leave this in a voicemail. This is cruel in and of itself, the fact that it was delivered in a voicemail, but also you already had this conversation with him in the beginning of your relationship. And it makes sense that as two adults, you would assume that what he was saying about his desires to have a children and how that may or may not happen and how he feels about that would be accurate and true. So I can only imagine how hurtful this was for you to hear. And then also for him to then also make that your fault. What's really striking me is that he is extremely emotionally immature. And again, you can just imagine if you removed all the context and you just listed out his behaviors, he sounds like a grown man child, like a grown wounded child. And he also sounds extremely dysregulated. This hot and cold, the voicemail was then followed by him calling you and saying a few days later, you would make a great mom, but then it would be your fault if you couldn't meet my needs and I would have to be nasty to you. If you zoom out, an adult saying all of these things is absurd. And I don't mean that to be insulting. I mean that to really highlight the degree to which his wounds have taken over his behavior toward you. This is not your fault. This is not a reflection of your worth as a partner. This has, I think, nothing to do with any of your attributes and anything to do with you other than the fact that you are very kind and it is causing him to be angry. And I know that that doesn't make sense. We think if we treat people with gentleness, with kindness, with loving patience and acceptance, that they will return that and they will love us. But when you are dealing with someone with a severe attachment wound, severe fearful avoidant attachment with severe avoidant attachment mixed in there, you will get these very intense positive and negative emotions and behaviors. And you saw that in the beginning, and now you're seeing that now. And one other thing I just want to mention here before you take over, Ken, what happens a lot, and I've noticed this with fearful avoidance and dismissive avoidance particularly, is that they have this very big piece of underlying learned helplessness. And they have this around a lot of things, and they have this around the happiness of their life, the success of their life. And they think every partner that they're going to be with is just going to magically make everything better. Every partner that they're with is going to make all of their internal shame disappear and their wounding disappear, and it's going to make everything great. And that is not possible for anyone. We cannot heal each other. Everyone is responsible for their own wounds. So I feel like a lot of the anger that you see coming up from him is him being angry at you that while you are lovely and perfect, or as close to perfect as can be, he still feels rotten inside and he's angry about it. And that is, again, a sign of the severity of his attachment wounding and the severity of, or the level of emotional immaturity he has.
Yes, I agree with all of that. And I actually want to say there's something about this which is uniquely different from a lot of other cases that I've read out, even with you, Amy, which is this guy's blaming you for a lot. Normally, I find avoidant attachers, even if they're, in the severe end with their behavior, yes, they may blame you for one thing or another, but not to this degree. Like, this is chronic. Like, I feel like with his instability and how he blames you almost to describe how his life is just like miserable. He's beholden to these old people in life. The fact that, somehow if he couldn't have, biological children, it would all be over. And he absolutely knows this. I feel as though we are entering into the realm of potential personality disordered sort of stuff. And I'm actually going to say this is feeling a little bit like covert narcissism as well, too. I can't make that diagnosis, but I can still say I've got a little bit of flavor of that because covert narcissists are usually known for a lot of blame for why their life is terrible, why nothing gets better. They are the people who will sleep on their life and blame everyone else for why things didn't happen for them. And they have a tendency to just complain endlessly about things not turning out the way that they want them to. But they have more than just a fear of intimacy. They have a fear of success. And I think it's also because they don't want the spotlight on themselves because they know that if it was, they worry that people will think they're a terrible human being, which it can be a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy to get to know these individuals because they act so nasty with people. And that's not something we normally see, even with people who are just fearful avoidance or dismissive avoidance. Mild and moderate, people in that category do not have so much, dysregulation around how their lot in life is just, the responsibility of everyone else.
Oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely. And especially with dismissive avoidance. Dismissive avoidance will be the last people to make their stuff yours. And the thing is, I noticed that he says here to you, Jane, your feelings are your responsibility, not mine. That is a very dismissive avoidant belief, that everybody's stuff is theirs. But then you have this flip side of the fact that he's saying your feelings aren't his, but all of his feelings are yours. And to your point, Ken, I really do think, and again, I'm not qualified to make that diagnosis, but I agree with you in that his behaviors, his wounding, the way he's dysregulated, everything that he's saying, it is really speaking to something above and beyond just an attachment issue. This is not common, normal fearful avoidant behavior. This is not common normal dismissive avoidant behavior. If anything, it is on an extreme spectrum of a combination of the two. But these behaviors are not just justified, I think, by attachment wounding. There's a lot more going on here, and there's a lot of emotional instability here. And it's very jarring, and you can see it in all of his behaviors, the hot and cold, the contradictory statements, the blame. Yeah, I agree, Ken.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we find out more very soon. So Jane continues. When I went to his city, I discovered that his sudden thoughts about children came right after he received divorce papers from his ex-wife's lawyer that she'd been pregnant, but lost it a few months before she left him, saying she couldn't imagine having a family with him due to his emotional instability. That's giving me Godfather Part 2 vibes right there. She engaged in an affair with another man before she moved out. During my stay, he said, "What did I accomplish in my life? I'll be divorced, live in a small apartment. Professionally, I won't achieve anything anymore. I won't even be able to offer my family the same standard my grandpa and my father did." He broke up with me at the end of my stay after I asked for clarity since I couldn't live with the uncertainty. He responded, "Well, then let's end it," but quickly suggested staying in each other's lives, and then moving to his city. However, he kept blaming me for not wanting biological children, claiming he suffered throughout the entire relationship, knowing for the past year it will end, and that the breakup was a natural consequence of Jane's decision from the past. After the breakup, he visited me twice, saying he missed the city and my cat. It was a constant push and pull. I'm laughing because of just how, emotionally dysregulated this is. 1 minute blaming you and then claiming he wants to see you and the cat because he misses you. This is ridiculous. He'd expressed love and affection, then withdraw again. He admitted no one had loved him like I did. Yeah, of course, but also rationalized the breakup, saying, "It is what it is." Just when I was getting used to the breakup, he would reach out, pulling me back into emotional conversations. He once suggested either cutting contact completely or continuing as we were, visiting, having sex, but without emotions, until we either hated each other or met someone new. He even said, "I should just cheat on you. Then you'd hate me and it'd be easy to leave." My God, I want to take a pause here. The vitriol in this man is something that the regular fearful avoidant would not even get close to. Like, this guy is vile. This guy has so much disdain that's bubbling to the surface. I gotta be honest, we are really in the realm of personality disordered sort of stuff. Like, this is disgusting sort of stuff that's coming out.
Oh my gosh, Ken. Yeah, I really agree. The further we get into this letter, the farther away we are getting from any kind of common
Yeah.
fearful avoidant or dismissive avoidant behavior, especially dismissive avoidant. Dismissive avoidance wouldn't get near this level of drama and volatility and toxicity with a 10-foot pole. And to your point, fearful avoidance really wouldn't either. They're more likely to, but again, this is well above and beyond. And truly, you can just see it's very unstable. It's almost to the point where, well, I think it is to the point where he's not making sense. He's not making rational sense. And Jane, and I'm sure that hindsight is 2020, and I'm sure that you see things much more clearly, having written it all out and looking at it from a distance. But we understand that when you are in this situation like this, it is very hard to zoom out and see things happening for what they are. And we also understand that a lot of times people that are emotionally unstable and have a lot of wounding can present as very secure in the beginning. And we get very attached to that beginning person that they are, that version of them. And so it makes sense that you kept giving him these chances even after you saw these behaviors. And it seemed like he was trying to explain himself out of this stuff and blaming you. And a lot of time when we're in a relationship with someone for an extended period of time and there's this pattern of them blaming us for everything going wrong in the relationship, even though it's clearly their fault, we can come to believe that it is our fault. And so it's not a good situation. And yes, Ken, I really do agree. This sounds like it's above and beyond an attachment issue.
Yes. So let's continue with what Jane wrote. He joined me on my birthday trip in July. First evening, he was sweet and caring. On my actual birthday, he was distant. He wished me happy birthday, and that was it. When I brought it up, it turned into major drama. I found out he had started messaging other women. His only one answer was accusing me of being in touch with other men while we were together, which was not the case. He yelled, "This breakup and me being distant come from your decision from the past. I can't allow myself feeling and expressing my emotions for you because afterward, I have to go to therapy myself for weeks." He cried, and after he left, he did not want to talk to me and went silent. 2 weeks later, I wrote a loving, vulnerable letter saying, "I love you, but you made a decision to break up with me very clear, and I'm letting you go. I hope you'll be happy." His response was, oh wow, you are a clingy, covert narcissist. You should be grateful I tried to have a relationship with you and that I stayed in touch with you after the breakup, but now you should leave me alone. After I didn't reply to this message, he called me angry. "You're being manipulative and you want to use me to fulfill your needs. You're panicking over losing me." I replied, "You're not responsible for my healing after the breakup. I never expected it from you. Imagine, there are people who love you as you are, telling you that it is not an attempt to manipulate you." He finally admitted, "In the past, when I was happy, it was taken away from me. Now it's myself who has to renounce someone who makes me happy. I'm suffering. I didn't want to lose you, but I had to make this decision. We can try to stay in contact, but you have to stop being so dramatic." He blocked any attempt from my side to pick up my stuff from him. After weeks of silence, I asked for my belongings again. He called me just to chat and to say he'd bring them someday to my city, and went silent again. A month later, he announced he'd come by without checking my availability. When he came, one day later as agreed, we had an emotional conversation. We both cried. He told me he missed me and loved me. He held my hands, hugged and kissed me. He kept two of my things saying, "You'll get them someday." He hinted at wanting sex, but I didn't engage, not wanting to restart the cycle. He looked at me and said, "Why are you so amazing?" He pointed theatrically at his tattoo he made while being with me and said, "You'll always be with me here." Then he left. It still left me devastated and questioning everything. Was I a rebound for him? Did he ever love me? Did he end things because he was afraid I would see emotional instability? Was the children's topic an excuse? He made the breakup my responsibility, and I felt like he wanted to control everything. Not only his own, but also my emotions and how I perceived the breakup. I felt muted. I'm very curious about your opinion on my story. Well, we've been sharing a lot of opinions on this. Amy, do you want to share your thoughts off the back of the end of this letter? And we'll get to the questions in a bit.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Jane, I'm so sorry that you went through this. This whole thing sounds like a volatile roller coaster. And it seems I'm really getting the sense for the end of this letter in your note to him after the breakup that you really made peace with it and you understood something's going on here. You did such a good job of I don't know if you knew you were doing this, but it sounds almost like you were utilizing this tactic that people do use to deal with narcissists, which is called gray rocking, where you don't really argue with them back. You try not to give them any sort of emotional fuel because they feed off of both positive and negative emotional feedback. I'm sure you didn't know that you were doing that. If you did, more power to you. But it is, again, in theme with this entire letter that is sort of like a fun house, a not fun fun house. He calls you a clingy, covert narcissist. Now that is absurd. And again, it really just highlights the fact that he is emotionally unstable and he's just not making sense. And again, this is classic projection. Perhaps he is himself a covert narcissist, and perhaps he has been told that, perhaps in therapy, likely by his ex-wife, and now he is projecting that onto you. Clearly, we do not get the impression that you yourself are a narcissist. It's unbelievable, and it's almost it's hard to understand where he was coming from. I don't even know if he knew where he was coming from, but it's just a mess. I don't know what else to say, Ken. It's so black and white. I mean, it's so hot and cold that, yeah. What do you think?
I think this is above just fearful avoidant attachment. I'm actually going to say I think he outed himself as a covert narcissist. Again, please take in mind what I'm saying with a pinch of salt to those of you that are listening. I can't make these formal diagnoses, but I think for those of you that have listened to enough of these letters, you start to see the differences in the severity in each of these cases. And this is something unlike anything I normally hear about. And I think some of the core themes of this, which are unique to this story, are his feeling of intense unlovability about himself, that he feels like he's a terrible human being. Like he keeps going back to this idea of, why are you so amazing? And it just makes me feel like he has deep, 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 deep shame about who he is as a human being. And I feel like this is something that I think speaks to a very, very vile core inside of inside of him, in that he can't comprehend someone being this good. And I think he's out to get you. Like, I really think he's out to destroy you. Like, I think anytime you try and actually have a reasonable conversation, he's not interested in having, understanding. He's not interested in trying to come together to work on this. He's interested in bringing you down to his level to take that radiance and also that lightheartedness and also, more importantly, your conscientiousness away from you. He wants you to fight him. And I think this is about, this is, as you've said consistently, anytime you've sort of gone into this, there seems to be this drama. He's also, holding on to your belongings, and avoidance will do that every now and then, like that happens. But it's now going into the realm of power play where it's still keeping you involved and invested because he still has your stuff, which means there's still a connection here. He's also got a bloody tattoo on his arm about the two of you, stating that, you'll always be there with me, while simultaneously deciding what happens to the both of you as well, too. I mean, this is a guy who is introducing quite intense power play in this dynamic. He's also displaying a lot of like dysregulation to the 11s. I'm not even going to go to the 9s. We're just going above and beyond here. This is someone who has such a distorted reality. Like when you went to have, like as you were saying Abby before, like when you were trying to get, to have a conversation about letting him go, he lost the plot and made it out like, you're a covert narcissist and you're manipulating him. And of course, he then explains that this was something that came from his childhood. But, to me, it's in like he was obviously saying, like, when I was happy, my happiness was taken away from me. Hey, that's a classic fearful avoidant thing. But the degree to which he's projecting on you and he's also just attacking you and yelling at you, whether it be via text, voice memo, or by being with you in person, it, like, to me, it's just like he sees you as one of two people. He sees you as Mother Teresa, can do no wrong, or he sees you as a vile, covert narcissist who's just like his mother. This is splitting. Like, this is him seeing you in one of two lights. You're either all perfect, or you're just the source of all of his problems. And yes, splitting can be something that we see in emotionally dysregulated people, but the extremity to which he idolizes and hates you is just next level.
Yes, absolutely. The degree of everything is next level. He sounds also like he doesn't have a strong self-identity, which
No.
is also very common in personality disorders. The projection, the kind of incoherent, contradictory arguments. And I agree, and this isn't about you, Jane. This is about his wounding and this is about his pain. And unfortunately, when we have such low self-esteem and self-loathing and such a high level of shame, it doesn't matter who we're around. It doesn't matter how much people try to love us. We will destroy them. Trauma is contagious in that way. Um, and the gaslighting, the manipulation, the going back and forth, him blaming you for everything, him making your feelings his responsibility. Imagine, and I know that this is hard because you had feelings and there were a lot of feelings there, but I have to say, it is a very good thing that this ended because
Mhm.
these sorts of disorders, whatever he has going on, and again, I'm not qualified to make a diagnosis, but I can tell you this, whatever he has going on will not get better. It will not get better on its own. It would not have gotten better had you stayed. And I think that you did everything you could. But I think, even back in the beginning of the letter, it was showing signs that none of this is your fault. This is a severe emotional, instability, everything that Ken just said, but to a very strong degree.
Yep. And so I think moving on to the questions, your first one to us was, Jane, was I a rebound for him? Did he ever love me? I know that's two questions. Personally, I don't ever like answering this question because I feel it can be quite degrading because it's sort of like, oh, well, was I less than? Was I just someone who he projected all of his feelings from his past relationship onto? I'm going to say no. It may feel like that because you just, you're sort of getting all of this off the back of his marriage, but he's got a damn tattoo on his arm about you. Like, I mean, to me, it seems like there's enough significance there, which leads me to answer the question, did he ever love you? I think he definitely has strong positive feelings for you. It may be an immature form of love, but I still think it's, he definitely had an idea of love. And I think my answer to this is, I think he's treating you the way he was treated growing up. This is a guy who, takes away happiness whenever it's there. Like, as he said to you way earlier, he knows he has a bad habit of destroying good moments because that's what he's used to when he was growing up. I'm not making an excuse for it, but I'm just saying this is a very warped definition of love. I don't think it's a case. I know that people often question them, like, how could someone behave this way if they ever love me? Well, our caregivers had a funny definition of love, but for them, it might have been how they were raised too. Not everyone has been brought up on a diet of treating people with courtesy and respect. That's a form of love, but unfortunately, it's not the model that everyone else was given.
Yes, yes, yes. And when we have attachment wounding, we will give love, just like you said, Ken, similar to the way we received it. And you can't love someone into healthy love. You can
No.
participate and co-create a healthy relationship, but that takes two people. So, what were you a rebound for him? I think that I think that he definitely has some wounding from his marriage, but I think that yes, he probably did have loving feelings for you. The relationship in the sense of his admiration for you, that was all real, I suspect. And I think that he did feel those things. The problem is though, when you have this wounding and when you have these disorders going on, your wounds come online the second your feelings come online and they cloud everything.
Yes. Yes, completely agree with everything that you just said. And at this point in time, there's no basis here for healthy, mature love. You're trying, and this is something that he resents in you because on one hand, he wishes he could have that, but he clearly can't see himself being able to co-create that with you, which nicely leads into the next question, which is, did he end things because he was afraid I would see his emotional instability? I think it's more than that. I think it's not just the emotional instability. I think it's just who he is as a human being in his core is that he believes he's an absolute piece of shit. He really does not believe he's worthy of love and that he's a terrible human being. I wouldn't be surprised if he probably internalizes that he's a covert narcissist. I think he's deeply afraid of you actually getting close and seeing that very, that vile part of him that he can't seem to divorce himself from. It's all toxic shame, amongst other things. But yeah, I think it's more to do with his vulnerability, and the emotional instability is a symptom of that.
Yes, totally. And a lot of people think that narcissists have a very high self-image and a high level of self-worth, and they're very full of themselves. And that is a defense mechanism. That is a survival strategy. They actually feel incredibly low about themselves. They self-loathe, they feel incredibly insecure. And so Did he end things because he was afraid you would see his emotional instability? The thing is, you already saw a lot of his emotional instability. Um, I think this, and even just to bring a little bit of attachment back online, because although he probably has something else going on, he could also have layered in there an attachment wound. And the thing about that is, when we've got wounding, we can only be in a relationship that matches our subconscious comfort zone for what love is. And that is why when we have an insecure attachment style, so many people leave it. If you're a fearful avoidant or a dismissive avoidant, good, healthy love will feel scary and threatening to you. So I think that in addition to resenting you for all of this, he is not capable. He doesn't have the capacity, he doesn't have the tools to probably recognize and especially not participate in healthy love.
No, and I think again, looping back the attachment stuff as well too. I think that when you're someone who's been modeled on a diet of incivility, chaos, and also snatching the good moments of your life without you ever being able to really fully enjoy it, that's all you know. So, in combination with feelings of worthlessness and hopelessness, how are you possibly able to enjoy secure, healthy love? I'm not making excuses for this guy. I'm just simply saying, like, it's not something that you're familiar with. You have adapted to, you know, emotional neglect and quite severe emotional neglect in this case, from the sounds of it too. And I dare say, the more that you put up with his emotional instability, the less he's probably going to respect you. The less he's probably going to, feel good. I think he's probably going to also feel like he can get away with murder in this experience with you, and he can just do whatever he wants. Now, if I had to offer one gentle piece of wisdom to this, which I think you're already doing, Jane, you definitely need boundaries with a guy like this. Like, this is quickly turning into boomerang cycling. Like, he's already come back and forth a few times. I know you still have your stuff that you need to get back from him. I can't tell you what to do with that stuff, but I am saying this is a time where I would actually be, I can't give advice to clients, but I'm going to tell you now, if it were me, I'd want strong damn boundaries and a detox from this, because this is intense as hell. And I also see you've asked another question, Jane, which is, was the children's topic when he was bringing up how I can't have children with someone who's not able to produce them biologically, was that an excuse? I'm going to say yes. I think there was a few things going on there. I think that on one hand, if we go back to the attachment stuff, I think that was his avoidance side trying to shut down intimacy and closeness in combination with some real shame going on there as well too about the nature of having children. So I feel like you got a little bit of projection, fear of intimacy. It was a whole smorgasbord of shit fuckery.
Yes, what Ken just said. Um, was it an excuse? I think it was, Jane, for all the reasons Ken just said. And, again, you have to zoom out. If he were a healthy, emotionally mature, emotionally stable partner and adult, this topic of children would have been a discussion. It would have been a two-way discussion. It would have been kind and compassionate and non-confrontational. So the way, of course, we can't ever know how he truly feels about children. Given his initial response to that whole discussion, that whole topic in the beginning of your relationship, it does seem like it was an excuse and he was just using it as ammo to try to further rupture your relationship, to further justify his leaving. And again, he's not leaving because of anything you did. He's leaving because he cannot recognize healthy love and he cannot participate in co-creating it. And the thing is, when you are a person with all of these wounds, the wounds to the level, to the degree that we suspect he has them, when somebody's trying to love you, it actually pisses you off. And it pisses you off because you're expecting that love to make you love yourself. You're expecting that love from the other person to make you feel better and to solve your life. And when it doesn't, it makes you angry. And when you don't have the tools and the emotional maturity to understand what's going on, you will just try to destroy everything. You might try to destroy it to make the person fight for you harder, and you might try to destroy it because you feel trapped. But he has so much going on that I think it's really safe to say the topic of children, I don't think truly had any bearing on the breakup whatsoever.
I completely agree. And just rounding this out, I see, Jane, you've written, he made the breakup my responsibility, and I felt like he wanted to control everything. Yes, not only his own, but also my emotions and how I perceived the breakup. I felt muted. I want to round this out because I can see, as we've obviously, finished this letter, I just want to say my last thoughts on this are I think he has a very distorted narrative of this relationship and how it's gone down. You are trying to explain to him a version of events based in reality he is never going to accept, because that would mean listening to the truth and listening to how he's played a role in this relationship's breakdown. And anytime he hears that, it's going to be perceived as an attack. It's going to perk up his shame wounds. He is not interested in taking any accountability for this. And so even though you've approached this probably from the stance of someone who's relatively secure, you've approached this from the stance of trying to communicate well, trying to take ownership for the situation. This is a man who's wanted to control the narrative, the intimacy, and so much more in this relationship.
Yes, yes. There's a huge theme of control here. And as you know, if you imagine a relationship as two people in a car and you have someone who's very angry or a wounded, angry inner child at the wheel, it's going to be a disaster. And there's truly nothing, I mean, there's nothing healthy about his behavior. There is not a single green flag here, Jane. And I'm just looking at your last question. He made the breakup your responsibility. It was not your responsibility, Jane. This breakup was 100% him. Like I said, I truly think even if you were the most perfect person in every way, shape, or form, it wouldn't have changed the outcome of this. He's an extremely unhealthy person. And just to echo what Ken said, it is, my strongest, most loving recommendation to, I would even say, to not have any contact with him. I think
Yep.
you need the strongest boundaries. There is no benefit that can come from you continuing to pour into him. And even if you say, well, I'm not going to pour into him, but I'm just going to be his friend and I'll just be quiet support in the background, nothing good can come of this. You can pour all of the love you can ever have in the universe into this person, and it will be like pouring your precious soul down into a bucket with a hole at the bottom. It will not stick. It will not make a difference. And that is no testament to who you are and your love. That is only a testament to his level of wounding. And, the last thing I'll say, Jane, is that, breakups are such a delicate time and they're such a painful time, but they are also, I think, a time that is so ripe for the most meaningful, deepest level of healing and self-discovery. And what you've just gone through is so, so hard. And it is also given you so much information, and it is pointing to places within you that you can learn to nourish and strengthen, so that if, God forbid, you ever run into a person like this again, you will stop it in the beginning. You will see the red flags for what they are, and you will feel the strength within to leave that. And I don't mean to say that you don't have inner strength, but when we've got some wounding of our own, it's sort of like our red flag detector is broken. It needs to be recalibrated, and we can't see things for what they are. So I think it might be a great idea for you to meet with a therapist or meet with a professional to go over the autopsy of this relationship and find ways that you can heal from this while healing the things inside of you that allowed you to be in this relationship.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that I echo what Amy said. My personal opinion is if this were me, I'm not engaging with this person anymore. I will forego whatever belongings I had there if they were belongings that I truly didn't need anymore. Hopefully they're not major belongings. But just to round out, I do want to say I am so sorry you've gone through this, Jane. I can tell. This guy is definitely into you. I have no doubt about that. but this is not the basis for someone who has the capacity to build a functional relationship with you, because everything's going to be on his terms. It's all about how he perceives himself and you will forever be that covert narcissistic mother who he can never get rid of, or you're going to be seemingly perfect for a day or two before he goes back to hating you again for making his life miserable. So they're your options, unfortunately, in this, and it's terrible. But I agree with what Amy said. I think you would have learned a lot from this experience too. Anyways, just to round out, thank you everyone for joining us today for this. I'm grateful for this letter, because it's one of the few times that we've actually had a letter where there's been hints of something more that's going on beyond just an attachment issue. Amy, was there anything quickly you wanted to add before we wrap up?
Yes, I just want to say, Jane, and for anyone listening, I hope what you take from this is that regardless whether this was an attachment issue or an attachment issue plus something else like we think it was, do not let this breakup or anything that he said or did to you mean anything about you. Make that your mission to understand that all of this hurt and pain he was projecting onto you is because of his hurt and pain and not because you deserve it or because you are worthy of it. It has nothing to do with you. And I hope that that really lands for you, Jane.
I can only echo what Amy said again. Thank you, everyone, for listening to this today. And I look forward to not only having Amy back again in the future, but also for our next letter reading. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.